Hi there, and welcome to Cait Casts On. If you're new here, my name is Caitlin, and I'm a knitter, spinner, sewist, and sometimes quilter based out of the Pacific Northwest. I have a fun little episode for you today where I'm talking all about my 2026 knitting and making goals and some projects and patterns that I have in mind for the year as well. So grab your craft of choice, settle in, and let's get started. I would say in general, I really love to plan. I find the process really enjoyable. I love seeing a good plan worked through. But honestly, in the past few years, I've really struggled with finding the right balance between planning and creativity and spontaneity in my making. But I've been doing a lot of brainstorming and thinking, kind of working some ideas around in my mind since early last fall, and I think I have a really good, solid framework to head into 2026 with, and I'm really excited to share it with you today. I've decided to kind of tackle things a little bit differently than I have in years past, but I think that this kind of unique structure is going to work really well for me. I have 5 big picture goals that I'm going to share with you today, kind of targeting the big picture direction that I want to take in my creative practices this year. I tried to find a good balance where they definitely pointed me in a direction and helped me stay on track with what I really want to achieve this year, while also allowing some room for flexibility and creativity along the way. So I have 2 knitting goals, 2 spinning goals, and then 1 kind of overall creative goal that I'm going to share with you. And I hope that this format works and that I can carry this kind of structure into years to come. So first, I'm going to talk about those big picture goals just so you can get an overall idea of where my head's at for this year. And then I'm going to dive in and share some very specific patterns and projects that I would love to knit. I don't want to force myself to hold too closely to those specific patterns and projects. I want to give myself some room to change my mind and have a little bit of flexibility. A year is a long time, and I'm sure my mind will change throughout the year. But I do feel like the exercise of pulling out the patterns that are really calling my attention and just looking at them from a wide angle lens and seeing if I can pull out any patterns or themes is a really helpful exercise. And doing that has kind of informed my goals, and then my goals have kind of informed the patterns I pull, and they all kind of work in tandem in a really nice way. And I'm really happy with where things are at right now. So let's go ahead and get started with my first knitting goal for the year, which is to enhance my knitting practice with more involved decision making and detail. You know, I'm at a point in my knitting journey where I feel like I have a good number of sweaters and hand knit objects in my wardrobe. And as time goes on, I'm just finding myself more drawn to prioritizing process over product. And that's not to say that I don't love and use the things I knit, because I do, but I'm just craving slowing down a little bit and kind of pushing myself to spend more time on a project, to learn a new skill, to try a new yarn, to just kind of rethink the way I do things and see if there's any opportunities for a little bit more joy or learning or growth, or just a way to enhance the process a little bit more. I think a lot of my process has just become automatic for me because I've done it that way for a few years, and it's just a habit now. And I want to take this as an opportunity to kind of step back, look at how I go about starting and doing my projects, and try and find areas where maybe something could be improved. One way that I have already kind of started doing this is implementing a mid-project block in every single garment that I make. So tees, tanks, and sweaters. They all, at some point in the project, get put on pause, put in the wash, blocked with some wool wash, and then laid flat to dry for a couple days. And I have found that that really, really helps me make better decisions about the project that I'm making. Starting to do this was so annoying. I was so annoyed that I had to put the project on pause. I couldn't work on it for a few days. It just felt like this giant red stop sign in the middle of my project. However, it was really, really helpful to do. I have found that doing that has led to garments that fit me much better. When I do a mid-project block, I rarely need to make alterations after the project is finished. And I'm just overall happier with the projects that I get when I implement a mid-project block. So prioritizing that, I feel like, has become very worth it to me, even if it's annoying in the moment. I will say it is getting easier and easier to do the more I do it, because it's in the back of my mind. I know that like at some point I'm going to want to put this down, and I can kind of prepare for that. But I've just found it to be really, really helpful in creating projects that I love. So that's one way I'm already implementing this kind of mindset. But coming into the new year, I just kind of want this to be an opportunity to step back from my process, take a look at the things that maybe I've taken for granted, and just kind of see if maybe there's a better way to do it, or maybe a more thorough way to do it. For example, like my process right now is very much find a pattern or a project that I want to make, pick a yarn that I think would work well for it. In many cases, I typically pick a yarn that I've used before, order the yarn, and make the object. It's pretty straightforward, but I'm wondering if maybe there are some opportunities to explore new kinds of yarn, maybe just order a skein and swatch it up and see how I like it, and just allow myself a little bit more creativity, curiosity, and exploration. And I'm sure there's other ways that I can kind of incorporate this goal, so that's just kind of one of the big mindset shifts that I'm hoping to make in 2026. My second knitting goal for the year is a little bit more practical and straightforward, and that is that I want to build up my hand knit sock collection. One of my goals for 2025 last year was to perfect my perfect custom sock fit. I previously wasn't super happy with how socks were fitting. I didn't really ever pull for hand knit socks, but I do like the process of making them. And so I wanted to find my custom formula to make socks that really fit me well and that I really love wearing. And I'm happy to say I definitely achieved that goal, especially there was a pretty steady improvement throughout the year, but especially on my very last pair of socks of 2025, I feel like I nailed it. Like my custom sock fit, it's perfect. I wouldn't change a thing. And I'm really, really excited about making more socks using those measurements and like that style of construction. So going into this year, I am going to try and build up my hand knit sock collection. That's going to involve knitting new socks with some yarn that I have in stash. I'm sure buying some sock yarn throughout the year as well. But also I'm going to go ahead and cut open some of the socks that I currently have knit up that don't fit me super well, harvest the yarn, steam it, reskein it, and re-knit some socks using that as well. Because there's really no point in having socks in my sock drawer that I don't love the fit of. So we're going to go ahead and do that throughout the year and kind of prioritize building up that collection as well. Then I have 2 spinning goals as well. My first spinning goal is that I want to learn at least one new drafting technique. I started spinning mid-2024, and the first 6 months of that journey were very much just kind of wrapping my head around my e-spinner, how to draft, how to ply, different fiber types, just like getting a handle on the very basics of it. And then last year, my primary focus was consistency and knowing how to spin pretty much any weight of yarn that I wanted. And I would say that I worked really hard at that, and I feel like I achieved that goal. I'm really proud of the consistency of all the yarns that I spun last year. And I was able to get down actually to a lace weight yarn with my very last hand spun project of the year, which is crazy to me, but I'm so, so proud of it. And I feel like I have gotten a lot of competency in my spinning using the short forward draw. That's the only kind of drafting technique that I have used so far. And part of that is because it's kind of, in my head, the most intuitive and basic and simplest. But also because when I started spinning, I pretty much only used worsted spun yarns. If you're not familiar, a worsted spun yarn is most yarns I would say that you could buy commercially. They are a little bit more smooth and shiny and like compact. There's less air in them. So they also have less yardage per gram, if that makes sense. They're a little bit denser versus a woolen spun yarn. They have a lot more air trapped inside of them. It's just a different way of spinning yarn. And I am starting to find myself a little bit more drawn to using woolen spun yarns in general. So I would really like to try some woolen spun drafting techniques this year, at least one. I might do a long draw, I might do something else, I'm not totally sure, but I'm really excited to kind of expand my skills in my spinning and learn a new drafting technique this year, and just kind of grow the kinds of yarns that I can spin for myself. My second spinning goal for the year is to get better at documenting and tracking my fiber stash, my handspun projects, and then also the finished skeins that come out of them. Right now, I really don't do much documenting at all. I have little note cards that I use as reference cards for when I'm actively spinning that tracks like where the fiber is from, the colorway, the fiber content, and then has a sample of the single and the plied yarn that I want to use. And then finished skeins get little tags like this that say the weight they are, how many yards about they are, the fiber type, stuff like that. But that's pretty much all I have in terms of documentation for handspun. I don't really take pictures of my skeins. I don't put them online anywhere or even like have like one cohesive journal of anything. So I want to get a lot better at that and get on top of that, because I'm getting to a point where I'm using my handspun more, I'm knitting with it more, and in some cases I'm gifting the finished products from those skeins. And so I don't have them with me anymore, and I don't have any record that I made them. Like, they just don't exist in any way, shape, or form other than my brain knowing that I did it, and I know I'm going to forget at some point. So I want to get better at documenting my fiber stash, my projects, and the skeins that come out of it. And then my last big picture goal for the year is what I'm calling my creativity goal. And this year I decided to make that I want to create more self-drafted pieces than I did in 2025. Last year, I think I made 2 like fully officially self-drafted pieces. There was a few ones that were just kind of like really customized versions of a pattern, but there were only 2 that were like done from scratch, not counting socks. So this year I just need to do 3 or more self-drafted pieces in order to reach this goal. I feel like that's pretty doable. I actually have quite a few ideas of things that I would love to self-draft. First and foremost, I have wanted to make a self-drafted Fair Isle sweater for Christmas for a few years. Every year I watch, Christmas movies or whatever and find some character wearing some sweater, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I would love to have a sweater like that. And so there's a few inspirations in the back of my mind that I would love to pull from, but ultimately it will definitely be something quite custom. But that is something I would love to do this year, is create a fully self-drafted Fair Isle sweater for myself for Christmas. There's also kind of a cable design in the back of my head that I would love to make. I have a lot of knitting for olive merino scraps, leftovers in my stash that I think I could make kind of a really cute scrappy vest that I could self-draft. There's like a lot of really fun ideas popping around in my head that I think would make really fun self-drafted projects. So I just need to make 3. But the reason I decided to set this as my creativity goal this year is just because I'm finding I really enjoy the process of self-drafting. The combination of like measurements and math and gauge and design elements, I just find I really enjoy the process. And I think it's because it really, kind of like my very first knitting goal, it allows me to step back and kind of just approach the process in a new and very intentional way. So I really like that. I really like taking a minute to slow down and really think things through. It doesn't feel quite so automatic and mindless. And yeah, since I'm craving more intentional process, I think that makes sense. So I would love to do at least 3 self-drafted projects this year in my knitting. Now that we've talked about the big picture goals and you have a sense of kind of where my head's at this year, let's go ahead and talk about the specific patterns and projects that are on my mind for 2026. I'm going to start with a few that I already have the yarn and materials 4. And the first 2 actually are ones that I have already cast on and are currently on my needles. So those are definitely happening. First up is the Cove Sweater by the Knit Pearl Girl. This is a top-down drop shoulder construction sweater with these really beautiful 2x2 rib details. It uses a worsted weight yarn, and the recommended needle size is a US 8 or 5mm needle. I have actually already knit a Cove sweater and I really, really love it. So I decided to basically just recreate the exact same sweater, just using different colors. I'm using the same yarn and everything as last time. And I am using 2 strands of Knitting for Olive Merino held together in the color Pomegranate and Robin. And it creates this really beautiful and subtle marl that I really enjoy. I think depending on your tension and gauge, you might benefit from throwing in a mohair to this if you want. My fabric is definitely a little bit looser and more open than I think some versions of the Cove sweater are. However, I'm medium gauge and I do like the fabric that is resulting from this. But I have seen versions of the Cove sweater that seem a little bit more dense in terms of fabric. So that might be something you want to keep in mind. Personally, I kind of struggle with mohair and tend to not pull for the sweaters that have mohair in them. So I just opted to do 2 strands of merino. And I'm really enjoying how this project is coming along. I'll share about it in my next podcast episode, but I'm just about to finish the body on it. So making really good progress on it there. It's a really, really enjoyable process to knit. Very simple and straightforward. I think it would make a really good first sweater project if you're interested. It has very visible increases on the back panel, so it's really easy to see what you're doing and what the stitches and increases are doing as you're knitting them. And otherwise, it seems really well written. The Knit Pearl Girl has really thorough pattern writing, so it's pretty much has all the information you need in that pattern PDF. And yeah, it's just a nice, straightforward, and really beautiful sweater. The next pattern that I'm knitting this year, and actually I've already cast on, is the Olga sweater by Petite Knit. This is a top-down drop shoulder construction as well and has these really fun stripe details. The possibilities with your color choices are endless with the Olga sweater, and all the projects in Ravelry look so, so beautiful. This pattern uses a DK weight yarn, and the recommended needle size is US 6 or 4mm needle. I am using some really, really beautiful yarn. My main color is this lovely green from Coast to Coast. This is the color Red Herring, and it's on their Shanico fingering base. And I am holding this double in order to meet gauge. Holding this double got me closer to the recommended yarn's yardage than the DK version of this yarn did, so that's why I'm doing that. And then the other yarn I'm using is from Fiber MacGyver. This is also Shanico, and this is in the color Pearl. And again, I'm holding this double as well, just because that yardage is closer to the pattern's recommended yarn yardage. But these 2 together are so, so beautiful and so fun. I'm really, really happy with how it's looking and how the project is coming along. And again, I will share that in my next podcast episode, so stay tuned for that. Petite Knit's patterns are always really well written, and I find that I really like the way that they fit on my body. This one is rated, I believe, an intermediate difficulty, so probably not the best one for your very first sweater. But I feel like if you've knit a sweater or 2 and are comfortable just kind of learning as you go, that could be a fun one to tackle. The next pattern that I want to knit this year is the Marseille sweater by Petite Knit. This is also a top-down drop shoulder sweater with some stripes, but the stripes are a little bit smaller and more sparse. I might make some modifications to the stripes thickness and frequency, we'll see. But this pattern uses a DK weight yarn, and the recommended needle size is a US 6 or 4mm needle. I am going to be using some really, really beautiful yarns that I'm very excited about. I made this hand spun yarn in 2025 specifically with a striped sweater in mind. I kind of hemmed and hawed over what pattern I wanted to use, but I'm pretty confident in my choice of the Marseille sweater. And I'm really excited to see this yarn knit up. has these really lovely browns and rust colors and blues, and is just really, really beautiful. I love this yarn. This is using fiber from Wee Chickadee Wool Co. if you're curious. So I made this hand spun specifically for this kind of striped sweater. And then I actually found some commercial yarn to use as my main color that I think pairs really nicely with this hand spun. This is Knitting Yarn DK from Pearl Soho. It's 100% merino wool in a light worsted weight. And this is the color Ivory Gray. Just a really nice, soft neutral. I think it pairs really well. And I think it will make this yarn really stand out and shine, which is kind of the point. I might make the stripes a little bit thicker than stated in pattern. I'm just going to swatch and see. But I really do want this to be kind of the star of the show. And I have more than enough of this yarn than the pattern states. So if I wanted to make the stripes a little bit thicker or even just like add a stripe or two, I think I could do that. So we'll see, but I'm really excited to cast on this sweater soon. In the theme of drop shoulder striped sweaters, I would also love to make the Stripe Hype sweater by Kudavakika or Veronica Lindberg this year. I actually am going to be using 100% hand spun for this project. I've slowly been collecting braids of fiber to use over the last 5 months or so, and I'm really excited with how everything's coming together. I actually already started spinning up my main color, so the hand spinning process is underway. My main color is this really beautiful fiber from Yarn Jam. This is their Confetti Tweed base in the color Bear, and it is 89% Shanico fiber, and then like the little colored neps in it are acrylic and rayon. But it's just really, really fun. Lots of different colors come out in it. And yeah, this is the fiber that actually inspired the whole project, so I'm really enjoying it. Spinning it up has been a lot of fun. Sorry, there's some odd shadows on this, but this is kind of how it's looking spun up. Just lots of really fun colors. And I think it'll be really interesting in the end. I did do a little bit of a test for this project, like a little sample spin, and then like knit it up to make sure I liked the gauge and just how it looked. I have made some very minor changes from this sample spin, mainly in the angle of the twist, but I think it's coming out really well and I like it. So I'm very, very excited. That's my main color. For the colored stripes in this sweater, I have some fiber from Little Fiber Co. This is the color Earthy on their BFL base. It's this really nice green color, and I actually had this in stash from a few years ago, so that's a great use of that fiber, I think. And then I also have this really beautiful blue color. This is Just Like Those Royals on 100% American Rambouillet. Lovely. And then also on the American Rambouillet, I have this yellow, which is the color Sunshine. Super, super pretty. And then I have been kind of going back and forth on some of the other colors. I did have this really vibrant coral pink picked out that I ordered from Little Fiber Co. as well. And that was set aside for this project. And honestly, the longer I looked at it on my yarn shelf, it just didn't quite feel right. When I was like looking at all my stripe colors together, with the pink in this mix as well, the pink was calling a lot of attention, and it was like my least favorite stripe color out of the bunch anyway. And so the fact that it was calling so much attention to itself, I just wasn't sold on it. So I played around with I just moved that braid of fiber elsewhere and just took it out of the mix. And I think I like the combination a little bit better without it. So these colors are for sure happening. And then when I took away the pink, I have this really lovely natural BFL fiber from the Woolery in stash. I actually already did a sweater spin with this fiber, but with that pink pulled away, I thought this was a really nice color. I know it's more boring than a lot of the other colors, and maybe some of you will be disappointed with this choice, but I really like it. It feels very grounding. So I think that's going to be the fourth color that I use for stripes in the sweater, and I just need to find a fifth. I do think this would benefit from like a red color, but I think that the color that I originally had pulled was just a little bit too pink for me. I think I want something a little bit more red and a little bit more muted than what that was. So I have my eye out for something like that. I have plenty of time. I still have to spin up all of these other braids as well as 2 more braids of my main color. So I have time. It's going to be a process, but I think that it will result in a really lovely stripe pipe sweater. Now let's go ahead and move on to the projects I would love to make this year that I don't already have the yarn and materials for. First up is the 1988 cardigan by Hannah Kim. I am obsessed with this sweater pattern right now. It's all I can think about. This is a top-down cardigan with steek seams and has this really beautiful Fair Isle color work throughout. It's knit using fingering weight yarn, and the recommended needle size is a US 2.5 or 3 millimeter. I would love to use the pattern's recommended yarn to knit this up, which is Biche Bouche Le Petit Lamb's Wool. I actually ordered just like a couple skeins of this a few months ago just to try it out and see if I liked it. And I actually am in the process of making some mittens with it, and I really, really love this yarn. So having a whole sweater out of it, I think would be absolutely lovely. I actually already purchased this pattern so that I could get the charts and start playing around with color choices. So that has been where my head has been at for the last few days, is just playing around with a lot of different color combinations. Obviously just digitally, like with the charts. So it's not quite realistic, but I think it'll help me get a good idea of the colors that I want to order, because unfortunately I cannot get this yarn in person. There aren't any local yarn stores that carry this yarn that I can easily get to. The closest is La Mercerie in Bainbridge Island, Washington. But that's quite a trip for me, so I think I'm going to end up ordering it online, which is a little bit nerve-wracking because I kind of want to do a little bit of a different vibe than Hannah Kim does in like the samples. Yeah, playing around with the charts has been a lot of fun, and I think I have a good base. I might make a few tweaks here and there, but I think I will start by ordering like 1 skein of each color to swatch with. That way, you know, if I don't like the main color that I pick or any of the other colors, it's like I only invested in 1 skein of that. And so it's not quite as much of a big investment, but I'm really excited about this sweater. And I think knitting this is going to teach me a lot about how to knit my Fair Isle Christmas sweater that I want to make and self-draft. So I'm really excited about this one, and I would love to cast this on like soon. The next pattern I would love to make this year is the Kutar or Kutar pullover from Sari Nordland. This is a top-down circular yoke sweater with this really beautiful lace detail throughout the yoke. It uses a DK weight yarn, and the recommended needle size is a US 3 or 3.25 millimeter needle. I'm not sure what yarn I will end up using for this. I think this is a good opportunity to kind of experiment with a couple different kinds of yarn maybe, and just kind of embrace the process like I mentioned in my first goal. And it's definitely a pattern that I would love to knit, but there's a little bit less urgency on this one for me. So I have some time to figure things out, but I'm really excited to knit this one up. I have knit Sari's Kutar socks before, and that stitch pattern is so beautiful, and I really enjoyed working it up. So I think having a sweater with that same style of chart would be really lovely. I would also love to knit the Matcha Jumper by VertKnit this year. This is a top-down sweater with a contiguous style construction, but it's really clever because it has the appearance of a saddle shoulder construction, and I just think it's absolutely beautiful. It uses a DK weight yarn, and the recommended needle size is US 4 or 3 millimeter needle. Again, I'm not sure what yarn I will end up using for this pattern if I end up knitting this one, but I really love the look of it, and I want to add more saddle shoulders to my closet, so I think that this is a really good fit. Literally every picture I see of this sweater I just think is so beautiful, all the different versions, so I would love to make this one this year. In a similar vein, I would also love to make a Lakes pullover by Ozetta. This is a top-down saddle shoulder construction sweater using worsted weight yarn, and the recommended needle size is a US 8 or 5 millimeter needle. I actually have already knit a Lakes pullover a few years ago. But I think for this second version, I would love to kind of go in a different direction with my yarn choice. My first version uses some hand-dyed superwash wool that I got from Sorella, and it's beautiful. I really love the look of it, and it's so soft. It's very comfortable to wear. However, I think doing something a little bit more rustic, maybe a woolen spun, actually would be a really good fit for this pattern and just give it a little bit more structure. So that's kind of where I'm leaning for this second version. I don't know if I will have the skill to do this yet this year, but I think it would be really cool if I end up learning and gaining some competency in spinning woolen spun yarn this year. I think this would be really fun to use a woolen spun, hand spun yarn to make a lace pullover. And then, like I said, I want to build my hand knit sock collection this year. So I have some sock patterns in mind that I would love to knit that I'll just like quickly flip through. First up is the Oxbow socks by Drea Renee Knits. I have several versions of the Oxbow socks already. I absolutely love these socks. The process of knitting them is super fun and enjoyable. And this really interesting like knit purl texture just creates a sock that really forms well to your foot. And so I love the finished product of them as well. So I'll definitely be knitting at least one pair of Oxbow socks. If I'm being honest, probably more like 3 or 4, but we'll see. I also would love to make potentially another pair of Kutar socks by Sari Nordland. Like I said, I love that stitch pattern. I love the current pair of Kutar socks that I have, and I just think they're really elegant and beautiful. I would also love to make some colorwork socks. I specifically have my eye on the quilt cabin socks by Horsefeather Fire Arts. I think those are just beautiful. And then I'm sure I'm also going to self-draft a couple pairs of socks in like various rib and waffle textures. I have socks in my current collection that have those kinds of stitch patterns and textures that I really enjoy the fit of. So I'm sure I'll just be doing similar things to that as well. If you have sock patterns that you love, I would love if you could recommend some to me down in the comments below. And then on top of those patterns, I also have those self-drafted projects that I would love to work on this year. That Fair Isle style Christmas sweater I think would be really fun. I'm definitely very inspired by some old Christmas movies and traditional Christmas movies. I would love to do that scrappy vest using the Knitting for Olive Merino scraps that I have. A cabled sweater using my Japanese knit stitch Bibles. And then also I would love to try and replicate this Cezanne sweater that I found. It's been popping up a lot on my Pinterest feed, and I really, really love it. It's from a past season from Cezanne. I don't know that I will use those exact same colors, but I really like the construction of it. I like the feel of it. It feels a little bit thicker and more like a jacket, and I really like those Fair Isle motifs. So trying to like dupe that and create a similar style cardigan I think would be really fun this year. And as always, I am sure other projects are going to call my attention, catch my eye, and probably pull me away from some of the projects I've just outlined. And while I definitely want to honor my stash and the things that I've already purchased and collected, I also really want to give myself the flexibility to be creative, to be spontaneous, to try new things, and to use my knitting practice as a tool for joy and hope and inspiration. So that's going to mean some change of plans, some spontaneity, and some flexibility. I would love to hear some of your 2026 knitting plans in the comments below, especially if you're interested in knitting any of the same patterns that I mentioned. That would be really cool. But yeah, just generally, I would love to hear kind of what is on your mind going into this new year. If you have any specific goals that you're really excited about or want to share, I would love to hear those too. You can always come find me on Ravelry or Instagram. My username in both of those places is Cait Casts On. And I would really appreciate it if you haven't already to take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I hope you found a lot of joy in whatever you've been working on while we sat down and chatted, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.